Martha actually comes to us through an advocate, a community organizer, and a coalition builder route. Martha has worked for the Physicians for Social Responsibility LA since 1998, first launching the environmental health program and eventually becoming the executive director of Physicians for Social Responsibility LA. So we're very pleased to have you here to tell us more about the community aspect of things.
I don't have control of that, huh? I was gonna, okay, well, wanted to show a video. Let's see if we can get it to play from here. So, I feel like I'm gonna shift direction. So, I started at PSR actually to work on pesticides. I had a joint assignment between Physicians for Social Responsibility and Californians for Pesticide Reform. And my job was to help bring the health voice to the work around pesticides, to shift it from birds, bees, and trees to what it actually is, a health issue. So, and I come from a women's health and community health background, and actually it's nice to be back at UCLA. I was here when we took over the law school admissions office, so I have a long history of activism. And so we were founded in 1980. In 1989, the Los Angeles office was the first chapter to begin to take on, to broaden its mission from nukes, which was our nuclear weapons, which was our legacy issue, to take on public health threats. So it was actually our residents out of UC Irvine who started our gun violence program back in the 90s. And so it was ER physicians who first recognized that gun violence was a public health issue that needed a public health response, and that's really our approach. We are guided by the idea of prevention, and I can say it in this room without fear, precaution. Because for those of you who work in the regulatory world, this idea of the precautionary principle just makes everybody lose their minds. Regulators lose their mind, and staff gets really scared, and industry just thinks we're crazy. But we're supported by the voice of health professionals. We amplify their voice. We're rooted in community, and different from most environmental organizations, we are deeply rooted and identify ourselves with the environmental justice movement. And so this often will change your perspective on policy. So, and often many of the decisions that get made end up sort of leaving out the environmental justice community. And in California, that has changed. So you actually can't do anything without people that kind of look like me. And yeah, we are going to have some problems if you try to do things and tell me I need to go be the hood ornament for your campaign. But at the end of the day, the policy solutions don't work for me, right, for our communities. And that's often, and I'm going to be very blunt, there are tensions between environmental justice organizations and traditional environmental organizations. And our organization has been able to bridge those. And those differences are real and they're problematic in that equity is not the same as justice. And so these are the issues that we work on. We work from a very intersectional approach. We were one of the first organizations that created common movement with the reproductive justice community because we understood that endocrine disruptors are a reproductive justice issue. And so we were able to work with groups like Black Women for Wellness, California Latinas for Reproductive Justice. We have a long-standing relationship with the UCLA Iris Cantor Women's Resource Center for their annual Reproductive Health and the Environment Conference. And I'm a toxics person that got dragged into working on climate, and I spend most of my time now working on climate justice issues. And so we'll talk a little bit about what we're doing to bring those issues together and how we do our policy work on the ground. So this is our strategy, right? We are organizing to stop the bad, whether that's nuclear threats, siting of industries near people, climate change, our dependence on fossil fuels. We try to change the rules, find policy solutions that make these things incompatible. So we're working on urban drilling while we're also working on implementation of AB 32. We're working to change the rules of the game of how things are sited. So we're also working on Jordan Downs, which is a housing project, which is both a toxic story and a really, really sad story about cap and trade. So we work to end disparities in health and create resilient, healthy communities, right? Because sustainability, surviving is not enough. We want communities to be able to thrive. And so to be able to do that, we have to work differently. So this is some of the work that we're doing, we've created a tool that allows you to look at an industrial land use in South LA. We're focused on South LA at first. And it'll tell you what are the sensitive uses and sites within 500 feet. We're actually adding layers to that tool so that you can click on the site and it'll tell you what the chemicals of concern are. So again, I'm not talking about products, and I'll tell you why. Right? And then we're identifying those toxics of concern, figuring out, well, how do you clean them up? Because in South LA, a big part of redeveloping and protecting South LA and making sure that, you know, it's better neighborhoods and same neighbors is addressing this issue of land use and contaminated land use. Because when you take an industrial land use and you take all of them in South LA and you see all of it lights up, because there's always somebody living real close to something that shouldn't be there. So you're in the news, look in the news, you're going to be hearing about Chrome 6, because now the South Coast Air Quality Management District has better monitoring. So they found it in Paramount, and it's turned up in Compton now, and it's probably going to turn up in other communities. So these legacy chemicals are still with us, and that's what I'm going to focus on, because a lot of the work, both TSCA and the new TSCA reform, which we did not like, we were not happy with, because it leaves this legacy. And to us, many of us were used as part of that campaign. Promises were made that we were going to stick with this TSCA reform and make sure that those legacy issues were, those legacy contamination and those legacy contaminants were addressed. And it wasn't, because we know that achieving justice is hard, and sometimes people just want the win, right? And especially if you've been in a battle for 10 years, you're like, I just need something to win. But that often means that we lose. So we're also, because we're looking at both air quality and land use issues and climate issues, we end up dealing with a lot of different things, right? And so I want to thank the TEDx folks, because when we first started working on oil extraction, everybody was talking about fracking. But what really happens in Los Angeles is plain oil extraction. So these are actually the people who win, older white men, who helped change the face of Los Angeles from an oil producer to a real estate area. So these are people at City Hall saying, don't mar our GI tract with oil. So these were efforts to actually unravel the oil that had been produced. So this is actually, I think, near Echo Park. I hope that's the right one, in the early part of the last century. And this is what oil extraction looks like. This is what chemical exposure in everyday life looks like for thousands of Angelenos who live within 500 feet of an oil extraction site. And at these sites, we are using hydrofluoric, hydrochloric acid. One of the things that's happening at this site and many others is that they're actually using chemical odorants. So jasmine odor control, and when you actually look at the label, it says dangerous to the unborn fetus. And they're coming in and they fall out of all the they're sort of in a regulatory black hole, because the air district doesn't really regulate them, because it's not actually used to pump the oil, right? So they're not looking at it. DTSC doesn't look at it. And they're now like, what? They're using what? And they spray this stuff for 4 days into communities. And that's the fence line. The fence line is, you know, my hand. It's no thicker than my hand. So this is what happens, and there's all kinds of chemical exposure here. This was actually the report that was done by the Center for Biological Diversity and PSR-LA. There's a full report, but we did an infographic that made it easier for people to understand. And whether it's an eye irritant, a reproductive toxin, a respiratory toxin, neurodevelopmental, or an eye irritant. And what we found at every single community from Aliso Canyon, Aliso Canyon on, people were when you look at the MSDSs on this is what people were experiencing, right? We have reports of miscarriage, bloody noses, sore throats. And then when you look at the chemicals, that's what you would expect to find. Take a breath. Jordan Downs. So this is one of these stories where when sort of bad policy comes together in a whole bunch of really interesting ways. It's a housing project in Watts, former military site, in the top 5 most polluted communities in the state, and it's managed by the Housing Authority in an area where people want to redevelop. So they sold it and are redeveloping it. Unfortunately, it's built next to and on top of an old lead smelter. So there's lead, naphthalene, arsenic, and a bunch of other stuff. And there's an ongoing source of contamination somewhere in the area that we think it's Atlas Metals. So it'll probably also be Chrome 6. But it got sold, and it's going to be redeveloped. So we ended up creating a coalition with the Human Right to Housing Collective, PSR-LA, and now recently the residents and interns out of Harbor UCLA have been coming to do a lot of work with the community members to educate them about what they're being exposed. But this site ended up getting money from California's cap and trade money for its redevelopment. Its redevelopment it's on contaminated site, but the practices of the housing department has been that if you're actively engaged in organizing and asking what's in my soil, they're targeting you for eviction. And the people who are going to be displaced, brought to you by AB 32, are mostly young, single moms, African American and Latinas. So this is why you need to put social justice and equity at the center of your policies. So while those of us are bragging about all the money that's coming with cap and trade, what are you going to say to the women who are being displaced, right? And we don't really have all those kind of great emissions reductions that we're being promised. So yeah, we do show up kind of pissed off a lot. So this is a little more pictures of Jordan Downs and its surrounding community. We've now we were just there this weekend. We've conducted a number of health surveys. And now for our organization, we now are having to develop capacity on water because the residents were coming to us, our water's brown, our water smells bad. So we just got through working with another couple groups doing water sampling. We've done P-track monitoring. And what's really fascinating is because we've been working in this community, deeply embedded with communities, we've also gotten to know the electeds who serve this, who are also our targets around climate policy. So, and we've been able to, because of this organizing now, there's communities who are getting together addressing both the toxics issue and air quality issues. And the solution isn't what they're going to buy, right? Because these are poor folks. The solution is actually showing up and getting educated and getting engaged. Because for us, at the end of the day, the power that we have is not so much as consumers, right? And I'm a middle-class girl now, but I really do identify with, the neighborhood I grew up in and my working-class parents who worked in factories and furniture manufacturing is not far from here. So these are some of the kids. These are some of the tools that we've developed with the community residents and the physicians out of Harbor UCLA to be able to explain what the impacts are. Because DTSC has been working on this cleanup and produced a lot of information, but they've never told people what the health impacts of what they're getting exposed to. They're expected to understand what 80 parts per million of lead is in the soil, all these other things, but nobody ever says lead is a neurotoxin. Lead in adults may cause some gastrointestinal problems, right? Because they'll come, I'm fine, but their stomachs are always hurting. So it's really interesting, the perception of being okay. And then when you start to unravel that, you sort of, the histories of illnesses and health disparities. This is one of the, can you make that run from where you are? It's a video? I'm not sure where the thing is embedded. There should be somewhere, it should be embedded in there. I don't know how she got it to work. Nope. Oh, go to the escape there. Yeah, if you escape. It's not going to work. Okay. All right. So this is actually one of the health talks that was done. I know we don't have time anyway. Okay. I will ask. So this is one of the frameworks that we're trying to develop and get into practice. This is actually Dr. Bob Bullard, who we call the grandfather. When I started working, he was the father of environmental justice. We've both gotten old, and he's now the grandfather of environmental justice. And really about grounding the framework and principles of policies on that we have a right, an affirmative right to a clean environment. And then the other is shifting the burden of proof to polluters and dischargers, right? So part of what goes along with alternatives assessment and these other tools is this burden of proof that is often insurmountable for communities, right? So what's the role of scientists and policymakers in helping that? This is some of the tools that we've been doing to amplify the physician voice. So that's one of our ambassadors testifying at the California Air Resources Board meeting. This is one of our nurses who we've done a couple of ads like this, but she's come with us on district visits. And when she shows up to Sacramento with us and she says, I'm a nurse in Watts, legislators really, literally lean in to listen to what she said, right? And so it's a really powerful voice. She was able to, she heard a talk on lead, went back and did a patient search, and then she realized, oh my God, we do have a bunch of elevated lead levels at Jordan Downs. So she started working with us at Jordan Downs. And you know what? She had to show bravery because she did push her organization. I wanted to show you, can I show the BPA video? It's like a minute. Yes, sure. Go to the toxies.com if you can exit. So we wanted to show you some of the tools that we use, and I know that there's toxicologists in here. It's called thetoxies.com. So these are some of the tools that we've used. We've incorporated the ideas and concepts of popular education. So we bring together the arts with policy, but really taking people where they're at, using tools from popular culture. So for example, it's toxies.com, sorry. So we use those popular education tools to do everything from green cleaning classes where we show folks, because our folks are going to ask where to buy things, and if I tell them to go to buy Honest Company, they're going to look at me and say, shut the fuck up, right? Because not everybody can afford Beauty Counter, not everyone can afford Honest Company, not everybody has access to those. So when we show, all right, so if you can click on watch the webisodes, you have to click, yeah, there you go. What do you want to watch? BPA, fracking chemical cocktail, mercury, lead. Let's do BPA. Yeah, there she is. No, up. That's the wrong one. Oh, no, that's, sorry. Go ahead. That's BPA. Yeah, that's BPA.
You probably know BPA from her breakout role in plastics in the 1960s. Her recent stricter regulations have brought our attention to her other major roles, like planning, recycling, construction of houses, dental ceilings, and more. She increases risk of breast cancer, prostate cancer, and is linked to early puberty, obesity, and diabetes. I took a fantastic look into developing human body and probably saw that. Here she comes now. Excuse me, BPA? That was quite an impersonation of estrogen. You almost had us all fooled.
Yeah. I impersonate hormones, and I do it often. I am in 93% of people tested. I am just that kind of girl.
I see. Well, do you think that the viewers at home should be concerned over your health risks?
Yes. You know, you are increasing your risks of infertility just by standing next to me. Let me see. Decreasing the quality of your sperm. Oh. And keep an eye out for my sister BPS. I taught her a lot about endocrine disruption.
Cut.
So that tool can be standalone. You could break it and stop it at any moment. We can talk about timing. Dose makes the poison. What does it mean to mimic estrogen? And one of the women in there is now Undersecretary of Cali, PA for Environmental Justice. And I'll stop there. And please watch them. There's one for flame retardants that we had a lot of fun filming. Thanks.